Hi, it's time for some real school talk with your Uncle Sean Kane. This is the passing period. So I'm back in my hotel room after working with some teachers today on how to improve engagement and performance in their classrooms. And one of the strategies we were talking about was the idea of having kids work in small groups much more frequently. That making the small group the default instructional configuration of your classroom instead of having kids work individually all the time. Lots of benefits with this: behavioral, emotional, and academic. So the teachers I was working with, they liked the idea. Their question quickly became, well, what is the optimal group size? And that's a good question, and it may challenge your thinking. See, pre-pandemic, we thought the group of 2 was the optimal group size. With 2, you do maximize conversations, you maximize engagement, so 2 was a good thing. Coming out of the pandemic, though, not so much. See, during the pandemic and just after, much bigger deficits in student understanding, a lot of issues with content exposure, and heck, even attendance isn't where it used to be. So when you put 2 kids together, there's a much greater chance that both of those kids will get stuck at the same place because they haven't seen something or they don't remember something. And when that happens, your forward progress stops. And if that happens with multiple groups, the teacher really is in a bind. So we're saying now that groups of 2 is generally a no. All right, so what about the larger groups? What about 4 or 5 or 6? That would solve the content exposure issue. That would solve some of the lack of understanding issues. Definitely would take care of some of the attendance issues. With those bigger groups, there's always at least a kid who is somewhat aware of what's going on. That's a good thing. However, with those bigger groups of 4 or 5 or 6, the teacher has to manage those much more actively, be much more engaged. It takes a lot more movement and attention. And the reason why is with those bigger groups, off-task behaviors can flare up almost instantaneously. Off-topic conversations grow exponentially. But even more devastating, in those bigger groups, you could have a kid or 2 who doesn't participate. And the teacher would never know because the overall energy and the noise and the conversation and the work production from the bigger group hides the fact that some kids aren't participating. So your bigger groups, sometimes you don't have a choice. You got to manage them much more actively, but not our recommendation. The new optimal group size is 3. That's the recommendation. With 3, the chance of all 3 kids getting stuck at the same place, much less likely to happen. With 3, the chance of all 3 kids not being motivated to work, also less likely to happen. There's always at least a kid or 2 who can pull the student who's somewhat sort of sluggish and doesn't want to participate, can pull them along. Also with 3, you actually increase the number of social interactions. You double them. You go from having 1-to-1 to now 2-to-1. So you get those soft social skills and those behavioral skills, a chance to practice those constantly. So that's your new sweet spot. The sweet spot is 3. If you like this video, share it with your buddies, subscribe, or you can check us out at leadyourschool.com, or you can grab one of my books like The Fundamental 5. So, hope you like this. I'll catch you at the next passing period.